stage, and we kind of grilled him about coming back in the offseason. And they had just hired Dan Quinn, if memory serves. I think he had just met him within 2 or 3 days before we sat down with him on stage. But today he said, quote, "I come to work with a smile on my face every day," end quote. This is the time of the year where someone's going to tell you they got a top 10 offense or we could be the best defense in the world. You get those types of quotes.
Sky is the limit.
I'm in the best shape of my life, whatever. But this is a very real, honest, authentic guy. Like, this is the same guy who talked about not having fun, not enjoying it. I'm paraphrasing. Potentially wanting to be traded. I want to win. And if that means I got to go elsewhere, so be it. Like, this was the tone of the discussions a year ago with him.
Mm-hmm.
And today he's saying, I come to work every day with a smile on my face. Not to mention a guy without any guaranteed money who could easily right now be holding out. Because I think they just drafted his replacement in the second round at 36 overall this year. It's more likely than not at this moment, in my opinion, that he's not even on the team next year. Like, he's got all the reason and ammunition he would need as one of the best players on the team if he wanted to not show up and try to get paid again or get back in line and put his hand back out. And his quote today was, "I come to work with a smile on my face every day." I found that really interesting.
I did too. It's a good catch. I mean, it's a listen, they haven't won or lost any games as of yet, but I don't have a better way to say it than this, and I wish I did. Because this is so hard to quantify. But the vibe is good. That's what it is, right? Everybody likes being around Dan Quinn, and everyone likes being around Adam Peters. And this ownership group is allowing these guys to be themselves. We're now the cool kids table. We're not used to that. We're not really sure what to do with our hands at this moment, right? We haven't been this in such a long time. You either had to want the most money, be looking for a chance to kind of salvage things. This was a pit stop on your way somewhere else, or you were stuck here, right? Guys would sort of also come here instead of desire to come here. And that's kind of the difference. You're starting to see that. I mean, how often would they have been able to lure some of these one-year veterans, to this spot? The Ecklers, the Wagners of the world, right? The Jeremy Chins of this universe, who probably have choices.
Let's be honest, though. How many of the guys that they signed? I definitely think there's a few of them. Wagner probably. He said recently in an interview that he came here to play for Ken Norton. And that's basically why he came. I definitely think if with another staff, like a Ben Johnson-led different young staff, you're probably not signing Bobby Wagner unless you pay him more than everyone else. But how many of the one-year guys is like a guy that a bunch of teams tried to sign that they were lucky to get and wouldn't have come here otherwise? Wagner's
hard
the
to
only
say.
one I can think of.
Hard to say. I guess the way I would phrase it is it's not like they overpaid a bunch of these dudes. It's not like they did the old Dan Snyder way to get a one-year deal at like $20 million.
But how many people were in line for Fowler, for Farrell, for Eckler? I bet most of these guys had pretty small markets.
You may be right. I would doubt that we were the only team to offer these guys anything, but just seems to me that all of a sudden there's a collection of, oh yeah, we want to come do it. Whether it's Lance Newmark, whether it's their new director of player personnel from Baltimore, whether it's the contract negotiator from Detroit, all of a sudden, this is now a desirable place to be. We're pulling from the good organizations. Players want to be here. I think more so than, yeah, I'll deal with it, or that's fine if this is my last resort. It doesn't feel that way. And it's anecdotal. Again, it's hard to know everybody's mind and why they signed here, one way or the other. But it just certainly feels like there's a good positive energy. How long does that last? I don't know. Maybe until the end of September if you're 0-4, right?
Speaking of Bobby Wagner, I saw Chick Hernandez post this on social today, talking about his leadership and just like the kind of guy as an alpha that he is. So he was at the podium talking with the media, and one of the other players came up and was just goofing around. You see this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like a training camp bit, and the TV stations love it. They just can't get enough. Like, oh, you're going to grab our camera. You're going to hold the microphone. You're going to interview your coach. You know that bit.
Of course.
And it's kind of like one of those eye roll, like, okay, we've seen this before. And maybe I've just been at this too long now if that's not fun to me anymore. But anyway, a player came up and was kind of doing bits. And Bobby Wagner looked at him and said, time to grow up. And the guy just like walked away. Now, I don't know if that was overstated or not. That was the way it was kind of sold from the media that was there, was like Bobby Wagner kind of was like, hey, man, this is the part where I'm doing my media avail. This is like an important part of the process. But I thought that was interesting. Just as if it was somebody else, I don't even know if it's noticeable or if it's certainly pointed out publicly.
Mm-hmm.
But with Bobby Wagner being the guy at the podium, who we're expecting to essentially be the guy that runs the entire locker room now, that's a tell to me a little bit.
That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's always whatever the opposite is when you're not winning is what you're supposed to do. And I remember when it was fun to have Clinton Portis in costume. Everyone's like, this is great. And then someone's doing the exact opposite of, please take this seriously. And we'll go, this is great. The point is, there's no one way to do it. And we always pine for the other thing. Like we want a coach that's more down to earth until, Jay Gruden's getting, Deshaun Jackson is twisting the part of his shirt. Then we go, we need someone more serious. We don't like Club J. Remove the ping pong tables. And then we get a disciplinarian, and then that's wrong. I mean, until you win, there's no one formula, but it is interesting in terms of a cultural impact, having a veteran say, we're not doing shenanigans.
We found out via Mike McDaniel's media veil, the head coach of the Dolphins this week, that the Commanders are having a joint practice with Miami. So we found that out yesterday morning. Dan Quinn was asked about that. He said, right now, the Miami workouts ahead of the preseason game there are the only preseason game, joint practices on the books. He said there's a chance that they will add to that. They want to do more of them. They haven't been able to line it up. And it sounds like there's a better chance, Standing tweeted this today from The Athletic, that they would do that at the Jets rather than at home with the Patriots coming here. I don't know why that is, maybe just scheduling. But it's possible they'll do some of the joint work with the Jets, joint work with the Dolphins, and then play those preseason games. And I pointed this out yesterday. This is not news, but I do think it's just worth getting into, because I think people think that games are always more valuable than practice. And that really, in the preseason, couldn't be less true. Those joint practices are not only invaluable, but they are viewed by staffs as more helpful, and it's not that close, than preseason games. You see a lot of teams holding guys out of preseason games. There's a lot of reasons, but it is perceived a lot of the time that the juice is not worth the squeeze for injury risk, because you're not dictating the terms in those games on the situations you're practicing. So let's just say I'm a head coach and I really want my guys to get work on goal line defense or short yardage offense.
You might not get one.
Or red zone sequences. Or I need my field goal team to get work because we haven't been able to block live against someone trying to block field goals or whatever. In a game, like, you may get a lot of those situations or none of them. And in a practice, you quite literally get on the phone if you're Dan Quinn, in this case with McDaniel, who was on your staff in Atlanta years ago. They're good buddies. And who Dan Quinn helped to get sober, by the way. It seems like when Mike McDaniel was having his drinking issues, Atlanta's like where he turned his life around. So I'm sure they have a great relationship. But you get on the phone before those practices and you say, okay, what are you trying to get done, Mikey? And he's like, all right, I need this, boom, 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 boom. And then you just schedule the periods. And so you can come out of that having done goal line, having done red zone, both offense and defense, having done short yardage, having done third and long, having done third and short, having done onside kick. You can get everything done. Now, the owners don't like it as much because they're not getting the gate at the stadium. Fans don't like it as much because you're either sitting on bleachers, it's a hot practice, it's not authentic, or you're not at the game, sitting in your seat enjoying the game under the lights. But in terms of coaching, you get way more out of those practices, and this is going to become more and more the norm.
And I would say it has. I mean, and Washington was behind the 8 ball for all those years when they were in Richmond, because the contract with Richmond, without any foresight, was so poorly done that nobody benefited from it. But it was they couldn't schedule a home and home. So in other words, a team had to come to Richmond, and then Washington was like, okay, well, we can't ever go to your place to have a joint practice because we're stuck here contractually. So again, it was just a missed opportunity as all these teams started to turn to this as not only something that's kind of a neat thing, but to your point, you laid out very well. It's the new paradigm. Guys don't play in the preseason. They do this. This is where the work comes in. This is where you get the reps that aren't against your own teammate just wearing a slightly different color jersey. This is invaluable at this stage. Maybe there'll be a snapback. Eventually we'll go to play more preseason games. I doubt it, though, as we head towards 18 and maybe 2 preseason games all in. So I think this is where the most valuable work comes. So it's good to hear that they're doing at least Miami. I'm hoping for the other teams as well.
Terrence just said on X, no Ben Johnson alert sound effects when you just mentioned Ben Johnson. Love the show, by the way. We retire the Ben Johnson.
It's over, man.
Alert.
It's over.
Although maybe he doesn't get mentioned very often. Maybe we could bring it up, bring it back for the one every, 4 weeks or something that he comes up on the show. Speaking of head coaches, Dan Quinn's the guy. He met with the media today. You will hear what he had to say next on Grant and Danny. Welcome back, Grant and Danny on the Fan. Nats losers at home today, 3-2 to the Twins. That's in the rear view. We look ahead to the evening that comes your way tonight in sports conference final action in the NBA and the NHL. Earlier today, Dan Quinn and the Commanders were on the practice field for OTA batch of practices number 2 this week. He met with the media. Conversation started with the offensive line.
At the left tackle spot, you got Cornelius, you got Brandon Coleman competing. As you get deeper and deeper into your installs and everything, what are you looking from them specifically as they compete?
Yeah, I think number one, like you're right, that the competition is at a lot of spots. And at that position specifically, it's going to take more time. And the reason being is you've seen where we haven't done a lot of team together. We haven't done in padded spots together. So we're going to be really strategic as it gets to training camp and, finding markers and moments to say, okay, you get the first reps today. Next one, you get the first reps, and we'll take that process through the preseason. And through that process, it'll emerge. But what we're looking for mainly is just, the execution, honestly, of the offense.
You brought in some guys like Wagner, Ertz, Eckler, and all that, in addition to feel they can play, but the leadership aspect. So what kind of little things have you seen already where their leadership has maybe impacted others?
You may have seen like a little bit of time before practice or post practice. We call that like that's their time that they work on to get better. And you'll see Zach working through a specific route. You may see Wags, pulling somebody to the side and discussing a coverage or a concept to go. And so I'd say those are the small markers. And then off the field, if you'd ask one of those guys, take me through your process. And I think for a younger player, that's a big deal for them coming into the NFL to make sure it may not be exactly what Bobby done or what Zach has done or others, but there is a process that they follow. And that's a really important role for somebody just entering in. We're going to be playing football for a long time. And so make sure this is how I warm up. This is how I do things to take care of my body. This is how I study. And so those processes are really important.
Do you already see some of those younger guys heeding what they're saying and learning?
Yes. And like what a value for some of the players at their positions to come in. And, you found out early on, and I'd asked, Ben, have you met Zach? Yeah, he already reached out to me. And so knowing they were already ahead of them before they even got here, that's what leadership is all about.
Luke McCaffrey's college coach says he's really hard on himself. He makes mistakes in games and practice. How do you kind of coach a guy like Luke, who's a student of the game, son and a brother of a player, to kind of move on with things and not be such a perfectionist?
Yeah, I think that's true for all really good competitors. Oh, if I could just have that one play. It's true for coaches, honestly, as well. So really it's about getting to the next play and knowing that, all right, whatever just happened, I have to take that information and move on to the next one. So finding those spaces when something didn't go quite right and moving on to the next play quickly, that's a really important skill. What we do know is that there's going to be adversity that's coming. And when you have the mindset knowing, bring it on. I know this is coming. I'm ready for that. Then you're ready to transition more quickly.
You guys have games Thursday and whatever. I know you've coached on games various days of the week. The NFL's going to Friday and Tuesday. What do you make of that? How hard a challenge is that for teams and coaches when you have games on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, all that?
I think we were talking about routine earlier and knowing that you'd like to set everything up, where I have a game. This is what I do on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday. And so when those games come, you'd really just shift. This would be like a Wednesday. This would be like a Friday. This is what we do before the game. So it's not as difficult as it seems. You have some travel that you have to work in, shorter weeks, longer weeks. But again, staying true to a process. This is how we get ready. That's to me the biggest piece of it.
On sort of that leadership front with a guy like Wagner, who you've obviously known, what specifically does he do? Is it more of a lead by example? Is he a talking guy? What is it he kind of does that helps?
I'd say probably a little bit of both. And what you'll find from him is this is a rare competitor. I remember, going on 10 years now or longer, me filming an install. So, as coaches, sometimes you film to see, how did I teach and how did it go? And I can remember that day specifically, it might have been the first day of an OTA. I had filmed it and went back home that night to watch it. I was so pissed at myself because I didn't ask specific people the questions. In other words, Ben, what is this? And John, what is this? And so I'd ask questions and Bobby Wagner and Earl Thomas answered every question, as it come up. They just had that type of intensity about them. So I would say he is both. Pull somebody to the side to discuss it, think about it in this way, but he's does it in his own way as a leader. And that's what I want he and Zach and others that are here to make sure they're here as ball players first. But when you look back on it, some of the people that mentored him, now that's a way to pay it forward. And so that's one of the coolest parts of our game is when now you get to pass that along to the next one. And the very best players do that. And I look back and was fortunate to, coach guys like a Bryant Young or a Jason Taylor and, others that has made the Hall of Fame. But there was this common trait of sharing that knowledge to the next. And I thought that was always one of the cool parts of like the great players that were willing to pass it on to the next guy.
And with Emmanuel Forbes, just curious about his progress, but also you guys had him doing some punt returns last week. Just kind of curious, do you see that as possibly part of his future?
Well, I think right off the bat, we know there's more return opportunities. And so Emmanuel's got, ridiculous return skills as a defensive player of returning. So we wanted to add that part of it. Although he didn't do it at Mississippi State, that doesn't mean he doesn't have the traits necessary. So we got a big, deep crew now that we're working people both in punt return and in kick return. And so just like everything, we're trying to, find out what unique things a player has and how to feature them. That not only will be during this time of year. Can he be a punt returner? Can a safety come down to play dime? Can a tight end split out wide? Those are things that it takes time through training camp. One player may be able to, another player may not. And so it does take a little bit of exploring, but that's like our job as coaches to find any unique traits that the players have and then how would we feature those unique traits and trying to find the things that people can do versus the things that they can't do.
How is Jaden progressing?
As we're getting started, like it's a big passing camp. So for the quarterbacks, they're getting some really good looks. There's a number of coverages now that have gone in, from the first day of where it was maybe just 3 deep and man-to-man. So to see that type of progress from he and from the other quarterbacks, I think that's good. In the weeks ahead, we'll add team things to it and blitzes and, a pocket and that kind of stuff. But I think what jumps not only off the tape here, what you guys don't see in the meeting room is just the competitive nature and the learning and the command that he has already. And so that's something that speaks to his work ethic.
When you're a head coach and there's a lot of things on your plate, how much time, energy do you spend monitoring Jaden, checking in with his coaches, making sure that he's on that development curve that you guys would like?
Yeah, and it's for everybody, really, not just Jaden, but to make sure, and I get, the reason behind it, but each of the guys, what can they do? How are they making progress? So we debrief pretty much every day on a practice day, not so much on the non-practice days, and then featuring what other types of things do we need to add to it. So you may see post-practice, they're working one thing today and something different tomorrow. So you're always kind of tweaking and building that. And that's just how we do it at all the spots.
Sorry to hammer the leadership thing, but
no, it's one of my favorite topics, so bring it.
You guys as coaches can lead the way that you do and set the tone and culture and all those different things. How important is it to have locker room leaders, and what can that do for a team having kind of those veterans who can stand up in a locker room and say what needs to be said? Yeah, the very best teams I've been a part of were really strong in the locker room first, and those standards that they create together, to me, that's where like the gold is. And so having ways to hold each other accountable, to push one another, to challenge one another, and that's what really being a great teammate is all about. Sometimes you're the mentor, sometimes you're the mentee. And it doesn't have to be young to old always either. It's, like we were talking about earlier, a player now going to, do some punt returning. Well, Crowder's a great person to talk to about that if you've not done a lot of punt returns or kick returns. So finding these little spaces to lead one another, push one another. Sometimes it's in the weight room, to say, come on, this is a guy who brings that energy into that. Sometimes you'll see it on the field. So it's not one person that has to continuously lead in every way. That's what, if no one's leading in that space, that's a real cue. It's your time to stand up.
At this point in the depth chart and building chemistry amongst groups of players versus just having guys learn the offense, learn the defense, learn what they're supposed to be doing. And then how does that prioritization shift as you move through the spring and into the summer? Yeah. So if you look, big picture wise, there's certain parts of our identity that we'll be able to hit now. The speed, the execution of finishing plays downfield, the defense, the way they break, the way they run to the ball, like that's an identity part we're putting together. And I'm seeing, signs of that moving forward. The things that we don't get to see right now are the physical parts of it. Like that's not what this time is for. So what areas and knowing what to compete at that time. So in this time, it's competing, man, can I learn these details and can I really go execute really quickly, communication. So not as much of the evaluation it is the learning to go, but I do want to see that speed and see the guys communicate and the chemistry that goes. But as far as the depth chart is
not really right now. That's not part of it. We want to get as many guys, as much reps as we can. And then as we get into camp, then we'll be able to start building that as we go, which would include the preseason games.
You've got officials out there today. I know they do the training camp visit. What do you like about involving them?
Yeah, and we're going to try to do it for every practice. And officials at practice also mean that we now have the ability to really put ourselves in situations. So you'll see some 2-minute today, but as important as that, this was an ICT. This is why they threw it. This is why they called, offensive pass interference, whatever that may have been, of training the guys on what good looks like. That's a really important part of it. And so we don't want to create bad habits. So having the officials here is a nice check system.
Dan, training camp's right around the corner. Curious about your philosophy with joint practices, and if you have any joint practices that you know that you can announce or to that nature.
Yeah, so right now we have one joint practice scheduled with Miami, and so that will be there, and we'll work with them for a day, and then have our game. And we'll discuss that, with some other teams as we're going in to see if everything logistics-wise can line up. But there's value in it to say, just seeing other looks and people and formations and speed. And so there's real value to doing it. And so if we can, we will.
Chick, last one. We see them out here. The viewers will see them out here. What's the expectation from the players as far as the schedule goes throughout the week? What are they going through?
So in the early part of the day, meetings and workouts. And so in the strength and conditioning side, different things on different days. And then we go a portion inside where we work a lot of team and go through blitzes and run game to that. And then outside, we really work there's a long piece on our skill development. And so as you're going through it, Chick, that's what this time of year is about, skills. And if you keep working those skills hard, then you'll be able to trust those skills when you put it into the certain plays and the certain things. So for instance, a defensive player may have a certain coverage or a certain way that he has to play. You work that skill for this specific coverage, and then we play it today. Offensively, there's a certain route that may go in. This is the extreme detail for that route, the movement, and that's how you keep working the skills, and then you put it into the whole play. So think of crawl, walk, run. And so the crawl part is the classroom, honestly. This is how you install a play. We like to jog through them at 50%. And then when we get out to here, we really am looking to see, is there a hesitation, or are they attacking it with the full speed mentality? So if you follow that process over and over and over again, it takes reps. Obviously, if you put in one coverage or one play one time and run it one time, by no means is that a play that you have. So it'll take reps over and over again, so they can do them instinctively without having to overthink on it. And that's what I'm looking for.
All right. Thanks, Coach.
All right. You guys have a great day.
Dan Quinn meeting with the media today out at OTA practice. A few things he said there we want to circle back to, including an open competition, it sounds like, at left tackle, and Emmanuel Forbes adding to his portfolio of responsibilities. We'll do that next on G&D. We're Grant and Danny. Welcome back. This is The Fan, taking you up to 6:30. You just heard Dan Quinn's press conference out in Ashburn from today. A couple of things I wanted to circle back to. I thought he acknowledged right off the bat there that there will be a competition at left tackle that will include Brandon Coleman. Now, he said it's going to maybe play out, seemed like either further from now than some of the competitions. So perhaps that means by the time they get him into preseason games when they feel like he's ready, or maybe it could even go into the season, is what it sounded like. In some cases, we're going to figure out pretty quickly who starts, who doesn't. But what I heard there was, yeah, Brandon Coleman's got a chance to be our left tackle at some point this year.
I heard that too. And it is interesting because I think it was Craig Hoffman at one point asked him about, how do you handle spots where there are competitions, right? At this point. And he kind of threw some cold water on it, saying it's too early for that necessarily. But there are some spots where you don't have an obvious incumbent. Then not every spot can be a John Allen or Deron Payne or, Terry McLaurin and company. There are going to be some places where you probably need the cream to rise to the top. So it's interesting. I'm hoping that that Coleman pushes for that spot because it would validate the draft pick, honestly. I mean, it's a big gamble to me to let a lot of guys go off the board and say, well, we got this guy in the third round that a lot of people had pegged in the fourth. That's going to be your left tackle. If you end up right about that, talking about this organization, what a coup that would be.
I was going to say this could be their first spike the ball in the end zone and do your victory dance moment as a front office and as a collection of evaluators. If they hit on Coleman where they drafted him down the board as a starting left tackle. I forget who was on the show recently, but we had somebody on and they said, look, if they took him at 40 or 20, 30 picks earlier than they did, if they traded up, you would probably think, oh man, they love this guy. They think he's their left tackle. And you might feel better about the fact that they just drafted their answer at left tackle. Part of the reason why there's some concern that they haven't is where he got taken, which is probably true. I would add, though, that part of the reason he got taken where he did, chicken or the egg style, is that a lot of teams don't view him as a tackle. They thought he was more of a guard. This group, who we think is good at this and who I will give the benefit of the doubt on player evaluation to, thinks he's going to be a stalwart on the outside. And if they're right about that, I think it's an awesome, massive win. And it is the first big-time victory for them. Which is not to put a lot of eggs in this basket, because I think if he ends up being a good guard, I'm okay with that. Like, see Sam Cosmi. I still count that as a really legitimate win for the Rivera era, that you drafted a guy who's one of your best football players right now. Cosmi's underrated. And if people don't talk about him as a top 5 type player on the team, they're not giving him enough respect. He's become really, really good at right guard. They drafted him thinking he could play tackle. They've kicked him inside. Lest we forget, the only guy who's been an all-pro on offense or defense around here since the early 90s, Brandon Scherf.
Mm-hmm.
He was also drafted as a tackle. He played tackle for about 3 hours at OTAs, and then they kicked him into guard. And by day one of training camp, Morgan Moses was at right tackle, and he was inside.
Indeed. So as you look at this, if you wait that long, like this is like, again, it's almost, as you said, chicken or the egg type of thing, where if you knew Terry McLaurin was this good, you wouldn't have took him in the third round. Nobody would have. He would have been a first-round draft pick. He's outperformed a lot of guys that were picked ahead of him. That's one of those obvious things. Like if everyone knew Tom Brady was that good, he would have been a 6th-rounder, so on and so forth. And we all know this is such an inexact science. So my issue isn't necessarily Brandon Coleman specifically. I'm all in favor. Please draft guys with athletic upside at positions of need. I'm all in favor of that. To me, not addressing that spot earlier or in some way to have some security there when you have a rookie quarterback, let alone any quarterback, but that left tackle spot's a premium position. It just is. That you look at the paychecks, look at the free agency money, or the fact that none of these guys go to free agency. If they're good, they get signed long-term to those teams. They never, ever leave unless you're in a feud with the former team president.
Yeah, that's funny. I wanted to throw more assets at the problem.
Yeah, that's what I would have done.
Real quick on Emmanuel Forbes. There's 2 ways to look at this. Them having him return some punts is probably a good sign. He basically said the guy returns interceptions for touchdowns every time he touches the ball. Why wouldn't we try him as a return man? Okay, maybe. That sounds smart. It sounds like a cool idea. I also take this, and it's just from my own eyes last season watching the guy. This is not a great sign to me. They are almost trying to find a way to get something out of him.
That was my thought.
Maybe I'm leaping too far and making a major leap.
Then we both are, because that was my first thought, Jeeps.
How often does your first-round pick corner from a year ago, going into his second year, get asked to start returning punts after he struggled immensely? Grant and Danny with you on the Fan. Next, we're going to give away tickets to go see Old Glory Rugby in D.C. We'll also be catching up with our buddy Jeff Zilgett, who covers the NBA playoffs. West Conference Finals start tonight. We're with you until 6:30. The Grant and Danny Show is exclusively sponsored by the law firm of Condori and Murad. They provide legal services in estate planning, elder law, probate administration. Schedule your free consultation with their Fairfax-based attorneys. Visit kmlawyers.com. Be sure to mention the show, and you'll get a discount when you mention us. kmlawyers.com. Congrats. Caller 10 at 800-636-1067. You're winning a family 4-pack of tickets. Old Glory Rugby Saturday, June 1st against Anthem Rugby, Carolina. For the complete Old Glory DC schedule and for tickets, visit thefandc.com/events. Let's go to the BetQL guest hotline. Bet smarter to beat the books. Download the BetQL app. Visit betql.com. Our buddy Jeff Zilgett covers the association. Love having him on the show this time of year to get a little preview of what lies ahead in the conference finals. You can check out his work in USA Today Sports. Jeff, this should be an outstanding Western Conference final as we get ready for game one tonight. Handicap the series for us, if you don't mind.
No, what I like about this is let's start with Dallas and what they did at the trade deadline. They acquired P.J. Washington. For those of you paying attention to the Wizards, they acquired Daniel Gafford, and they became a better offensive and defensive team, and it took a lot of pressure off of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. They have some help with Derek Jones Jr., Tim Hardaway. Derek Lively II was a solid draft pick for the Mavs a year ago. So they have some depth to go along with, all-star caliber and, in Luka's case, MVP caliber talent. And then on the other side, I just really like the way the Minnesota Timberwolves have come together behind Anthony Edwards. But it's just not a one-man show. They're able to do some things with Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels defensively that make them really, really tough to stop or to score on. And then I think with Anthony Edwards' improvement offensively, the veteran presence that a guard like Mike Conley brings is that the Timberwolves have also been in the playoffs a little bit better offensively than they were during the regular season. I know we all like to, talk about or hear that defense wins championships, and I get that. But today's NBA is so offensive centric. The guys are so offensively gifted that you really need to have scoring on the court to compete. And I think the Minnesota Timberwolves have made some strides right there.
So let's get deep into this matchup here, Jeff. I thought Dallas kind of pushed Oklahoma City around a little bit. What you mentioned, the guys like P.J. Washington, Daniel Gafford, I thought they were more physical that series. Good luck doing that against Minnesota with the Twin Towers and how rough and tumble those guys could be. But I feel like Dallas has enough chameleon in them to still match up pretty well. Go into that for me, if you would.
Yeah, I do. And look, if you talk about Minnesota, and I agree with all your points on what Dallas was able to do. And I also thought in that series, Dallas was able to use its collective experience. Even though they don't have a championship team with this current group, Kyrie won a championship. Luka has played deep into the playoffs before. This is his second conference finals in 3 years. So there's a little bit more familiarity than with that Oklahoma City team. You could maybe make the point that the Thunder arrived a tad early. They're going to be around for a while, but it is a little bit of that learning curve that's sometimes required for some teams. But with Minnesota, I'm looking at that team as Tim Conley, and that's a name that's familiar to those in the DMV. His family from Baltimore have been involved with the Wizards in various capacities. He built that Denver Nuggets team to win a championship, but he left right before the championship team won to take over in Minnesota. And really what he did is he designed a team that, not only that he think could win a championship, but he was also angling with, you mentioned those Twin Towers, getting some more defense and having some defense on the perimeter with some hawking guards or wings like Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels, not only to go and beat the team he created in Denver, but to go win a championship. And look, I'm a little bit of a prisoner of the moment. I thought Denver over the past 2 seasons has been the best executing team in the NBA that we've probably seen in a long time, especially with the game on the line. And Minnesota was able to out-execute them and really take them out of rhythm offensively. That's tough to do against Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray.
So two-parter on Anthony Edwards. Luka's knee's been barking, Jeff. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
chance because of that Edwards, the gap is closed and maybe he's even the best player in the series? That's number one. Number two, the key might be him defending Kyrie. That matchup, can he win that matchup on the defensive end? Is he good enough to do that?
I think he's good enough to mitigate a lot of what Kyrie does. I will say this. Kyrie is one of the best shot makers I've seen in the NBA in a variety of different ways. And look, going back to 2016 when he hit the huge three-pointer in Game 7 in Oakland against Golden State. He was part of that championship team for the Cavs, and that bucket was as big of a three-pointer as we've seen in a long, long time in an NBA Finals game, especially with what was on the line right there. But then, just not long ago, if everyone remembers sort of that running left-handed sort of semi-hook shot he took to win a game from about the free throw line. The guy's just very creative. And for all the old school heads out there, he learned angles from doing the Mikan drill. And that's usually just taking the ball out of the hoop and shooting a layup on one side, shooting it on the other, and just finding out what works best. But he's going to need to be the best version of himself to be able to get past and score enough points against Anthony Edwards, who's really going to take this matchup to heart and prove that, not only is he one of the best young players in the league, he's one of the best two-way players in the league. So I think he's going to take that to heart right there. And then with Luka's knee, I'm not sure that it would look, and not only the knee, I think he's been bothered by an ankle as well. So he's at probably a little bit of a health disadvantage here. But Anthony Edwards, and again, I use this phrase one more time, the prisoner of the moment is, and again, he didn't have a great Game 7 offensively, but he scored some buckets when he needed to against Denver in that final game. But he is showing that his ability to make shots, take people off the dribble, be electrifying is right up there. I'm not going to get too much into the comparisons, and I don't mind some of the comparisons. It doesn't mean he's the next anyone other than the next Anthony Edwards, but we can certainly use some reference points about what he's doing. And he's showing he has that ability, though, to be a superstar in this league for the next decade.
USA Today's Jeff Zilgett with us here on G&D. So, Jeff, you touched on Kyrie a little bit. Love to go into a little further here. Obviously, if Luka's health isn't right, if he's, sort of too beat up throughout the series, kind of all bets are off. But to me, the key to Dallas winning this series is both Kyrie either holding his own or maybe even winning that, not necessarily one-on-one matchup with he and Edwards, because I don't know that they'll always be guarding each other, but also PJ Washington holding his own against one of those other bigs, right? Yeah. Like him and Gafford have to sort of match, Towns and Gobert with what they can bring. To me, that's sort of the under the radar part of this series is what Washington's going to do. Go into that for me.
Yeah. So look, he's been really good in the big picture of knocking down some threes. I think it becomes a tough matchup because Karl Anthony Towns, let's look at that. He's taken a little bit of heat over the years for either not getting Minnesota deeper into the playoffs or not being the, complete player, especially on the defensive end. But he was exceptional in large stretches against Nikola Jokic, which is no easy feat. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not going to say he's going to lock down PJ Washington, but certainly if Cat is playing like he did in that Denver series, is he gets a lot of help. I mean, that's the one thing that took a lot of pressure off Minnesota's defense was they didn't need Rudy Gobert guarding Nikola Jokic one-on-one. They could have Cat do that, and then Rudy Gobert offers help. And Gafford's main thing, and I'm going to talk about him just for a second, is he's basically a really good pick-and-roll guy, rolls to the rim, but that's something between Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns that they can defend. And Karl's got that versatility, given that he likes to, play on the wing offensively. He can go out on the wing and play defensively, too, against a guy like P.J. Washington. And so I think that defensive matchup favors Minnesota just a little bit against that offense. Look, Dallas's offense is really, really good, and they have some great offensive minds, not only on the court, but coaching on the bench with Jason Kidd, the head coach, Sean Sweeney, a very talented assistant coach. But I just think the way they built this team with Naz Reid coming off the bench as well, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker providing some defense, it's really going to be difficult for Dallas, even if Kyrie and Luka are on top of their game. Just that relentless attack, they're going to make life difficult. And if those two really don't have it going every game, that just makes it a lot more difficult on the Mavs.
Western Conference Final starts tonight. Eastern Conference Final began yesterday. Jeff Zilgett is with us breaking down the NBA playoffs on Grant and Danny. You can read his work in USA Today Sports. Jeff, speaking of the East, game one to the Celtics in overtime. How should we feel about what we saw? That the Pacers are going to be able to play with Boston, or that maybe they let the best chance they had slip away and that they're in big trouble?
I don't know if they're in big trouble in that regard. They did let a chance slip away, though, Danny and Grant. There's no doubt about that. But let me also give Boston credit here. And that was a game I covered last night, is for all the mistakes that Indiana made down the stretch for the fourth quarter and in overtime, Boston equally needed to make a play. It required a great play. I know they're talking about Pascal Siakam not fouling on the three. The way Boston ran that play was really well designed, and it made it difficult for Siakam to attempt a foul, because he either could have put Jaylen Brown on the line for three, could have fouled him, and Jaylen Brown could have made the three, and then he's got a 4-point play. So give Boston credit there. And then Jason Tatum had to convert a 3-point play and then make a 3-pointer from the top of the key to, give turned into a 6-0 run, but a 4-point lead after Minnesota went up. After Indiana went up a couple points. And so Boston did what they had to do. Way too many turnovers on Indiana's part. You cannot commit 22 turnovers that lead to 30-plus points in a playoff game. So you're asking the question, and I get it, is I think Indiana can play with Boston game in, game out. I'm just not sure they can make it a deep series, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure they're going to be able to execute the way they need to down the stretch. So I sort of use this when, the games can be close. And I think that's a really strong possibility here, especially the way Indiana's offense is. They are relentless. They'll take the ball, make or miss, and get going the other way. It puts a lot of stress on Boston's defense or any team's defense. But the games could be close, but it still could be a 5-game series in Boston's favor. And that's what I'm looking at right there. I know we talk a lot about Indiana's offense, and it does have some versatility, the way they can go big, with Obi Toppin, with Miles Turner. They can go small with Pascal Siakam playing the 5 sometimes. And I love the way Tyrese Halliburton plays. But don't forget that Boston has a great offense with all those guys who can score. Last night they had 3 guys score 26 points, get 7 rebounds, and have 3 steals with Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum. And I'm not sure that there's many teams, especially in the East, that can slow that offense down enough to win a series.
Well, Jeff, the only argument I can make, and I'm with you, by the way, I would rubber stamp it if I could, that Indiana might be able to take something out of that. They're not known for it, but I was pretty impressed with them defensively for a few stretches last night when they were trailing and then kind of locked down. Boston went cold, and that relentless offense that you mentioned, maybe that might be my only solace, is that if I'm the Pacers, I'm going, hey, look what we were able to do kind of in crunch time here. It took a pretty miraculous shot from Jaylen Brown to beat us, to get us to overtime. We did a lot of good there in the fourth quarter.
That's the mindset that Indiana needs to be taking into game 2. And I went over to they didn't have practice today, so we met the team over at the team hotel. And that's certainly after watching film that, they're disappointed in the turnovers. Rick Carlisle disappointed in himself. Rick Carlisle is one of the best offensive minds that the NBA has seen in, the past 20 years and his various coaching stops. And so I'm not surprised with that. So that's what they have to take away, that, yes, we've played with them, showed we can do it. And look, Danny, you make a great point. It was 12-0. They just got done a Game 7 match in Square Garden and played really, really well. But then they get to Boston Garden and it's, they missed their first 5 shots. They're down 12-0. And even in the third quarter, I think it was 72-59, down 13 and came back. And I think it's, their mindset is, all right, let's just get a bucket. We'll worry about the stops. They're not as good defensively as Boston is, but, let's get stops here and there and let's just rely on our offense. So I think there are a lot of good things they can take away And it won't surprise me that the one thing here that worries me about Boston in the big picture, and this is the scrutiny that's followed them throughout the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum era, is they do get a little lackadaisical. I mean, they lost a home game 2, in the first and second round, when you think they should probably win some of these games. And, they tend to have a bad game or too many turnovers. Jason Tatum, maybe he has like a 7 for 24 kind of game. And they lose a game. And so those are the things that Indiana has to look toward if they want to make this a series. But yes, they certainly should take away a whole bunch of positives from that, and they should limit the turnovers. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton he acknowledged this afternoon, last night, dribbled the ball off his foot 3 times. A couple key turnovers in the fourth quarter and in overtime. And so you clean some of those things up, and Rick Carlisle, makes a couple different coaching decisions. And, we very well could be 1-0. And yet in the would have, could have, should have game, it's sort of irrelevant when, Boston did what they needed to do and took advantage of their opportunities.
Jeff Zilgett, longtime buddy, NBA reporter, USA Today Sports, where he's been plying his trade since 1995. Jeff, thank you, buddy. We appreciate you. It's good catching up, and enjoy these games.
No, thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Be well. There's Jeff Zilgett on Grant and Danny here on The Fan. I want to pivot to 2 quick football topics, and we're going to have to circle back to these tomorrow because yet another Nats Day game means we didn't really get to sink our teeth into these, but I did just want to mention these to you. The first is I saw that Lamar Jackson has dropped weight, and so has Tua. Tua's down like 15 or 20 pounds, and Lamar, who had gotten up to 220 plus, is trying to get down closer to 200. I find that really interesting as we're talking about Jaden Daniels' weight here.
The second one more interesting to me than the first.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Lamar had some durability issues very early on and beefed up partially because of that, but he wants to get a little bit twitchier, maybe, if you can believe it, or more explosive.
Because I was saying, you clearly lost a step there, Mr. Jackson.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, from Tua's perspective, it goes without saying he had the concussion problems. Now, the Dolphins say it's based on how he landed. He actually did a bunch of jujitsu and actually practiced falling without hitting his head and how his body reacts when he falls down, which I guess is a big part of jiu-jitsu, which seemed to have helped him. But last year, he got through the full season after he added the weight. And the Dolphins said, okay, you proved you can do it. Well, now he's not at OTAs until yesterday, but he showed up and he had purposefully lost like 15 or 20 pounds. He wants to be a little quicker and lighter on his feet.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's that when the offense goes right and it's by design, that doesn't matter. You could be Jared Lorenzen back there for the most part. It's that second order. It's that buying that little extra time, moving just a little bit, slide in the pocket. He's never going to be Lamar Jackson, and that's not who he's supposed to be.
No, but here's my point
being a little bit more
this
nimble.
up, is it's a Jaden Daniels conversation.
No, that's right.
Like,
yeah.
Tua would be playing, I'd have to see his weight, but maybe down at like 210, 215. I'd have to look. Lamar Jackson, again, wants to get down into that like 210 range. Whereas Jaden Daniels, and he's very tall, it's a different body type, but he weighed he didn't weigh at the combine, I don't think, or maybe it was the combine, but at his pro day, right at 210 pounds, right? He's not going to play at that. I think we can all agree. He is going to play lighter than that, certainly as the year goes on, if not by week 1 post-training camp. But I bring this up because it was this huge story. It's still considered a bit of a knock or a question is, how sure are we that he'll be able to withstand the rigors? And yet you've got Tua, who's listed 227, who's down 15, 20 pounds. He's going to be 210, 215. You've got Lamar, who's the biggest comp you probably have to Jaden Daniels, who's going, yeah, I've been up to 220. I want to come back down now. Like, why is it perceived as this hugely significant big deal for Jaden Daniels? But everyone's just saying, by the way, Lamar's losing weight. Here's what he wants to be. And it's not viewed the same way.
That's a great question. I mean, and listen, the proof might be in the pudding. If Jackson gets folded up once, they go, maybe you should put that weight back on.
I mean, Lamar's listed. Now, some of these weights never really get updated or whatever, but he's listed at 215. I think he had played heavier than that, and now he's going to play lighter than that.
Because I feel like I remember him being lighter than that at certain points. But Daniels is, south of 200. And at that tall frame, he looks lankier, right? Even though Jackson obviously is not a fat guy by any stretch of the imagination.
Is that the difference that, because Daniels weighed 210 at the combine, so he's going to be listed at 210. But we all know that's not really what it is. Like, he probably played at 190 and change. I'm sure it was close to 200, but he was probably playing at like 195 in plenty of games this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, you saw it. If you watched him play, you saw some of those, oh my God, those cringeworthy, him getting thrown around like a rag doll type moments because of that frame. There are guys that look a certain way, that are heavier than you think, and then lighter than you think. Everyone's in between. He looks lighter than he is. Like Jackson, I would have argued, just by the way, if I was advising him, he clearly needs my advice about what to weigh and how to weigh. But I'd say, let's not lose that weight. You're still really fast, still quick as lightning, and maybe could take a little bit more punishment that's inevitably going to come from being a quarterback in the NFL. For Daniels, it's a mindset thing, right? Please stop lowering your shoulder. That's awesome. You want the yards. I need you for a decade. Please don't do that. But it's the other part is, can you withstand the things that aren't your fault? Those inevitable hits that have to come when you need to buy that one extra millisecond to make that throw for the receiver to break free, knowing you're going to get popped in right in the sternum. Can you withstand some of those? And more meat on your bones helps.
Other football storyline I wanted to hit. Dreams do come true. We'll talk a lot more about this tomorrow because this is something on this show that has been a passion of ours for a long time. We are on the precipice, perhaps, of breaking ground and getting rid of the chain gang in lieu of electronic measurements.
This is a good thing.
This is a long time coming. Yep. This has been long overdue with the technology at our disposal.
Multiple billion-dollar industry comes down to an index card.
The preseason activity is where they're going to test this. If it goes well, the report is that we could see. Now, all I've heard is goal line decisions made with the electronics, not spotting this year. But in the preseason, it seems like they're going to use the tech on the goal line. Did the ball cross or did it not? Obviously, it'll be chipped. They can tell exactly where the ball is. We should be able to do this. I mean, I'm watching Masson. Not trying to knock Masson, but not exactly the highest tech, most influential television network in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had this cool thing they were doing where they showed like the players rounding the bases, sliding just as they slid, almost like what you use in a video game when guys like wear the little golf ball things on their outfit and then you can see their arms, and the slide was exactly how they slid. I mean, the technology now is really, really cool. The league can absolutely determine exactly where the ball's at all times with some of the next gen and chipped data and the intel that they have. They can do this. So they're going to determine in the preseason, touchdown, short of the goal line, with that information and technology. If it goes well, they'll use it this season. And presumably, if that goes well, we could be doing this all over the field for first down, short of the sticks in no time.
The phrase that has been used here in all these releases is optical tracking.
Good.
Looking for optical tracking. That's great. No more dudes with sticks attached to chains. There have been too many embarrassing things where we can't get it right. I need it down to a science. It should be the most lickety-split dumb thing in the world, but it happens all the time. Like I know I'm the old man that shakes his fist at the television. Like this guy went out with his left foot touched and the ball was in his left hand, but they gave him like the ball was in his right hand. We just lose half a yard in either direction all the time. Every little bit matters, and it's just so casual and it's so whatever. It was kind of this thing, and it gets lost in the sauce. But over 60 minutes, wherever these games are so close, these guys are so fast, it's too much for the pudgy guy that's like also an accountant to keep up with. No.
I will watch the Western Conference Finals tonight, game 1. I'm also going to check out another episode of a show on Netflix called A Man in Full. Jeff Daniels.
It's in the queue. Is it good?
I don't know yet.
Okay. This is very Netflix where they take their time.
I'm not completely sold on the show yet. I think it's good. I don't know that it's great. Jeff Daniels is the man. I just think he's so underappreciated, such a talent. He was on Kelly Clarkson's TV show a couple weeks ago. I saw some viral clip while scrolling online, and he has written over like 100 songs, and he played one of them, and everyone cried. He's uber talented as a musician. No one knows it. That guy, man, Jeff Daniels.
Renaissance man.
Dude from Dumb and Dumber.
Yep.
Is an unbelievable actor, but he's great in this show. He's great in everything. But Harry from Dumb and Dumber puts on a clinic in this show, A Man in Full. He's doing like a super Southern accent. They're talking like this all the time.
And it's good?
Yeah. So far, I'm enjoying it, but I haven't made up my full mind on the show yet.
I like it.
Jeff Daniels has me coming back for more.
Yeah, pretty much now it's to the point if he's making it, I should probably take the time to see it. I'm on that level. That limited special they did is either 6 or 7 episodes, a limited series called Godless. He was so amazing in that series. I'm now going, whatever you want to make, Jeff, whatever passion project you use. I need someone just to say yes to Jeff. He played a one-armed guy that like had an affinity for like adopting troubled kids. That was this also the merciless gangster. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what this character is, but you're so good.
Feels like I'm running at an incredible rate, Harry. Harry from Dumb and Dumber. What a career. All right. Enjoy your nights. That'll do it for us. Another shorty. The Nationals losing to the Twins this afternoon. Linnell's going to keep you company on overtime deep into the evening. He will be with you until 10 o'clock tonight right here on The Fan. Big thanks to Darius, Ryan, who was running around like a madman because our setup at Nats Park. Bailey faltered. So appreciate his efforts today. Thanks for listening. We're back at it at 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you for coming.